Coming to you live from the closet of my office as to not disturb my wife, child, and 10-pound weenie dog. This is Mark S. with another edition of FBGT. I apologize for the delay. I know it's been a few weeks. Our little guy was sick, and then my wife and I both got sick, so it wasn't going to make for very good podcasting just to hear me coughing the whole time. For some of those early drafters out there, I hope you've been marked safe from the great hamate crisis of 2026. You know, it's always a bit touch and go out there for those first few days back when those injuries appear. Some of them, that have existed for weeks, and it drives you crazy because you drafted this guy 3 times only to find out he's actually been hurt since November. But this felt like a particularly difficult week for some of those star players, with Francisco Lindor going down, Corbin Carroll going down, Jackson Holliday going. I mean, there were a lot of guys on just the hitting side alone that seem to have been hit by the injury bug right away. So I hope you were spared mostly. I hope you managed to navigate those landmines. And if you're one of the unlucky ones, just know that all of your participants or all of your competitors are sure going to be in that same vote very soon, because it's inevitable for everyone. So our topic for today, which is going to be all about hardening your own personal rankings and opinions so that we can start to look at how to plant your flag in players that are going to lead you to draft glory in 2026. So we're going to look at how to kind of sway from the consensus, when to break away from ADP, and some of those factors that might inspire those decisions. We're going to blend a lot of the key talking points and takeaways from previous episodes in this one, and also look at some of the factors that might come into play when making these decisions, both statistical and vibey. The goal would be to come away from this episode with your most solidified draft game plan yet, as we start to turn the page into fab drafts and home league drafts. So this episode should be helpful for players of all skill sets, since it's more of a philosophical discussion about what you find important in player analysis. A lot of this will be in the form of questions that only you yourself can answer, and a little candid peek into the closet here. I struggled a bit with how to lay this one out without feeling like it was just the rantings of a crazy fantasy baseball person. But I like where it ended up, and I do think there is a lot you can take away from this episode if you think about this as more of a macro discussion on draft rationale and what you find important in your player analysis. We're going to do this in 2 pieces. First, we'll look back at everything we know so far, and I say no, I'm doing air quotes right now that you can't see, but we're going to highlight those key considerations as I see them right now personally. Then we're going to look at the current state of affairs as of mid-February. This rapid influx of recent news and knowledge, combined with the awakening of the industry as the draft season really begins to boil. So it's a combination of facts, figures, and in one case in particular, figurines. To wrap it all up, we will talk about how to take all of these variables and cook them down into one refined outcome, identifying the key players that will make that early roadmap that will guide us through these first important drafts. And we're even going to go through a 10-round mock draft with all of that in mind. So let's jump in. So as I mentioned before, I wanted to start by looking back at everything we know to this point, or at least what we think we know to this point. This is really a journey of self-discovery in some ways, going all the way back to your last season. You've probably been thinking about the mistakes you made last season and how they've impacted your results. I, for instance, had some pretty bad catcher duos last year, and I came up quite short in saves pretty much across the board, it seemed like. So in early drafts for me, I've been taking my lumps, and I've been sure to get 2 of the top 15 closers whenever I can, and I've been trying to do better pairing two catchers together earlier than I usually do. That latter one has been pretty hard for me, but you get the idea. I'm sure for a lot of you that have participated in the early drafts, if you're one of the obsessives like myself, your drafts probably reflect some of your shortcomings from previous seasons as well. At this point, you've probably also listened to those positional preview podcasts or done some reading on positional previews, and you have an established mental baseline of the player pool and where those cliffs are starting to appear. The same goes for the statistical profiles, like we talked about on the last episode. I know that had me prioritizing whip more so than I had previously. I'm feeling good about my understanding of what stats I should have banked at certain points. And I have that feel for the ADP impact on position scarcity. At least I think I do. Which brings me to some of those drafts that we've already got under our belts. So let's zoom out a bit now. Think about the draft habits you are developing so far. We get into this role of drafting over and over in the same formats, sometimes taking the same players. It's really important to pause here and reset a bit. Look at those rosters you've built already. Is your strategy working well? Have you overcorrected to cliffs or failures from previous seasons? Think about some of those guys that you seem to be landing on regularly right now. Why is that? Is it a safety valve at a position or a statistic? Is it a guy who moved mountains for you in 2025? And on the other side, who have you been completely forgetting about? Who are guys you haven't been getting and then cursing under your breath when it does happen? When someone finally takes them. A good example for me would probably be Joe Adele. He was a guy that I'm just so used to writing off that I was missing him completely early in the draft season. The more I started to look at his projections, the more I started to regret every time someone was pressing his name and drafting him before I was. All of your answers to these questions, and the others that I'm not even posing for consideration at this moment, will help inform the next phase of your journey this draft season. And if you haven't answered any of these questions with certainty for yourself, there's still plenty of time to dig in and get your feet wet. But I think this is the time of the year when the sharks are smelling blood in the water. Those volume drafters who win the big bucks every year, taking advantage of folks who are just getting started. This is where early draft preparation can literally pay off if you are drafting right now. So with that in mind, we shift our focus to the present. FBGT. So let's look at what is happening now and apply it to our preparations. For me, it always starts with ADP. Not because you want to follow it, but because you are trying to figure out where to break away from it. I might do one or two more draft and holds, but as I shift my focus to fab leagues, I'll start to look at OC ADP pretty much primarily until the Earth League ADP data starts to shake loose, because that's 15-team fab draft leagues. So that's the way that I'm going to frame this episode. I'm going to talk a lot about ADP, and I'm using 12-team OC ADP right now from the Bubba and the Bloom ADP tracker. And then later in the episode, I'm actually going to hypothetically lay out the first 10 rounds of a 15-team league, but I'm going to use this 12-team data because it's the most relevant and the most it's the most up-to-date and timely right now. So just to get that out of the way too. But I want to see who's getting all the love. I want to see who's being forgotten about. And I want to see who I've been missing out on or see who stands out to me that I think I need from these lists. I've actually taken to printing out the ADP by position, highlighting the guys who stand out to me for one reason or another, so I know who to zoom into further. This is also the beginnings of my personal do not draft list, so that I can get a real-time look at positional scarcity as I see it today. The ADP sort of acts as a bookend for me, and I'll get into that in a little bit more later. This is also the time where I think being plugged into the fantasy community is key. I love having a wide variety of podcasts to listen to because you can start to get a feel for who the global fantasy darlings are, along with the guys that no one really wants to touch. CBS Sports, for instance, just dropped their Players We Love pod for Valentine's Day. It's annual listening because it's downright hilarious. Scott White is amazing as always, but it's the first glimpse that you get at some really high-profile podcasters, players that they love. You also have these killer team previews that are being dropped. So Bench with Bubba comes to mind here instantly. So Bubba is amazing at these. He's been doing them for years. He gets these long-form team previews done all through January. I think he's just wrapping them up if he hasn't already. And they're full of insights and analysis from some of the biggest fans and admirers of each team that are also usually fantasy players. I think this is really helpful to know because you start to get a feel for who the fantasy market might be mispricing or misunderstanding. When you hear it through the lens of a fan or someone who's committed to a team, you're getting unbridled access into exactly the situation at hand. Now, of course, you need to parse this info like you would anything else. But what I'm listening for in these previews personally are when guests start to really speak with excitement and conviction about a player or a certain situation, because that means that's a place that they think there's an edge to be gained, or just a place that they're excited to see evolve from a fan perspective. Your favorite analysts have begun planting their flags. On the team side of things, you also have the beat writer puff pieces that are just starting to appear. Of course, it's best shape of our live season, right? But these little nuggets of information are massive. These are the players that the beat writers are in on early. Now, a lot of these pieces may be spoon-fed from the teams themselves, but these writers, this is their livelihood. We are playing this for a game, but these writers most of them do this for a living. So they are taking their early shots. They are planting their early flags so that they can look smart within their network, their community. So that's a really important little piece of information to follow. You get a lot of great details early on here in spring training that a lot of people forget because it's just covered by the news that comes after this. So now is a great time to be sifting through all these reports and trying to find any little edge or any little player profile you can to see if something might have changed from 2025 into 2026. A lot of the teams just also wrapped up their fan fests and their caravans, where tons of fascinating nuggets emerged, like when Craig Counsell said that Michael Bush will be an everyday player and facing lefties this year. You've got teams dropping their marketing calendars to try and sell season tickets. Who are the teams planting their flags in? Chandler Simpson has a bobble legs giveaway in June, for instance. There's been a lot of talk about how he's not even a starter in the fantasy community, yet the team seems pretty invested in him. This is not a statistical play or comment, but the guy's closer to pick 200 these days. Early in the draft season, he was going around pick 100. Can you find room at this price to take the risk? And then you have the handmaid of it all. The thing about injuries happening right now in mid-February is that a lot of them can be completely recovered before the start of the season. They might miss training camp, and that's definitely a risk. But just look at Zach Noto last year to see that sometimes a guy can still be a big win if they start late or if they start off the IL. Of course, a lot of this is speculation, and spring training hasn't even started yet. But you need to be looking for every angle and edge you can within the info available to us right now. FBGT. Now, I know that was a lot, so let's boil it down a bit. Think about everything that has led us to this point and apply your own knowledge of this game that we love to parse your thoughts and filter them down into actionable intel. Filter by variables. How many things need to go right for a guy or situation to bear fruit? Is it a handful of factors? Is it just playing time or just health? Obviously, less is more here. Byron Buxton being the perfect example, where last year all he had to do was stay healthy to give you significant return on investment. The less factors that can lead to success, the better. Now go back to those ADP sheets. Look at the players you marked for further investigation and think about them through the lens of everything you've learned and applied to this point. Let me use some of my own examples to help paint this picture a little better. So Yordan Alvarez is an easy one for me, I think. The skills are obvious, right? The playing time is obvious as long as he's healthy. The ADP is stapled to the third round, even though he was a guy who was going at the 1-2 turn just a season prior. He gives us average and power, this really unique combination of skill. Maybe not really unique, but this really important combination of skills. His status as a DH is a bit of a downer, but besides that, the only question is health. Given all of the above, this is a guy I'm comfortable planting my flag in, and I've actually discussed this on previous episodes. Now, it's a little bit riskier, but I think the same can be said for Zach Wheeler. While the unique nature of his injury does have us unsure of what he's going to look like when he comes back, I think it's a risk worth taking, because if he gives us anywhere close to a return to form, he's going to outshine the peers at his ADP level, which is right around pick 120 right now in those 12-team fab leagues. If he shows us any semblance of return to form, he's going to shoot up that draft ranking, those draft lists in March. So you're kind of getting in early here, and you're taking a risk that all you need are innings. You're hoping the skill returns. That's a risk. But even if he's not quite the same pitcher, he should still be a pitcher worthy of taking at 120th ADP. And then at that point, it just becomes a decision for you about how many innings he needs to pitch for it to be worth your while. Two other names I mentioned stand out, with one being much more palatable to the traditional player than the other, I think. So as long as the price doesn't skyrocket to unreasonable levels, I really like planting a flag in Michael Busch right now as well. He has it all except the playing time versus the lefties, and according to his manager during some fan QA sessions this offseason, he's going to get a chance in 2026, and he might even get that chance at the top of the lineup still. So when you combine this with the state of first base overall, and remember, this is a guy that can bring you in significant counting stats if those ABs tick up. I mean, sign me up all day. We haven't even touched the fact that he's a former first-round pick and a highly regarded prospect. It's starting to feel a lot different skill sets, but it's starting to feel a lot like Jarren Duran did when just a few years back, the only thing standing in his way was a spot at the top of the order. And he volumed his way to a significant return on investment that first year. You know, Michael Busch has great skills. He's being projected for like a 240 average right now, even though he hit closer to 260 last year. This seems like a guy who can outperform his projections if he gets the opportunity to do so at the top of the order. So I'm all in there for Michael Busch at right around ADP pick 110. And then last but not least, we have the polarizing Chandler Simpson. This one's fascinating to me because the price is now down to around pick 175, and it sways wildly from draft room to draft room, like people's opinions on the player himself. But I'm really intrigued by listening to Rays fans talk about Chandler Simpson. They absolutely glow about him. They talk about how electrifying it is for everyone in the game, or sorry, everyone in the stands when he is on the base paths. There's this palpable energy in the stadium. So for me, a team like Tampa Bay, where they're constantly platooning or shuffling players to other teams in trades, I think someone who can get fans out of their seats is really intriguing. The team clearly sees this too, as evidenced by their awesome bobble legs giveaway. Now the question marks are real with Chandler Simpson too. We all know he can't hit for power at all, and he's more likely to get an inside the park home run than he is to hit one over the fence. He's also not the greatest defensively, and the Rays these days feel like they have enough outfielders that they can probably win the 50-50 more often than not if they play every time. Does this have the makings of a guy that I want to plant my flag in as a starter? Not really, but he might be someone who can give me something unique off the bench, and I think that's important. If that price hits the right spot, he could be someone that I start to target a lot. So that's me applying my own filter to help me establish some guys I want to think about. And I just named 4 of them. And there are various levels of the draft pool, right? So we've got Yordan Alvarez early, Michael Busch and Zach Wheeler in the middle, and then we've got Chandler Simpson as a potential bench option late. Let's marry that to a potential draft strategy and go round by round in a 15-team league here for the first 10 rounds. So round 1, let's take the most well-rounded bat we can find. Round 2, maybe I push Yordan Alvarez up to make sure I get him, or maybe I go starting pitcher and then I grab Yordan Alvarez in round 3. Either way, we've got a well-rounded bat, we've got a starting pitcher, and we've got Yordan Alvarez. Round 4, let's grab a closer just so we can feel secure in that position. Round 5, you go back to the bats. You can grab a guy like Michael Garcia, who's got some speed at third base. Maybe you roll the dice with CJ Abrams, or you can grab a Jackson Merrill. Round 6, maybe you push Michael Busch up here if you want him that badly. Or you can try and wait a round and grab another arm. So if you do wait another round to grab that arm, some of those names include Framber Valdez, Yuri Perez, Chase Burns. We're talking around between picks 90 and 105 at this point. That's through the first 7 rounds. So round 8, this would maybe be where you take your shot on Zach Wheeler. If you want to wait around, so be it. You can grab an outfielder or a catcher here, let's say. Round 9, flip it. Grab Zach Wheeler if you didn't in round 8, or you got him early and then you get someone else. And round 10, I'll let you fill that out however you want so you can complete this Mad Libs of ADP drafting yourself. So now I'm going to go ahead. I just went through 10 rounds. I'm going to pull some names out from the end of each round. So guys who would be available at pick 15, typically in the first round of a 15-team league. And I'm going to assign these players slots on that team that I just drafted. First round, Fernando Tatis Jr. Second round, Yordan Alvarez. Third round, Chris Sale. Fourth round, Devin Williams. Round 5, CJ Abrams. Round 6, Michael Busch. Round 7, Framber Valdez. Round 8, Zach Wheeler. Round 9, Teoscar Hernandez. And round 10, let's round it out with Nate the Great Eovaldi. That team that I just named is above the 80th percentile in every 15-team league target category after 10 rounds. It's got enough base for me to consider a guy like Chandler Simpson late if I want to go that route as a specialist, and it has enough of an SP base to support Wheeler being late to the party. Now, maybe it's not sexy, a lot of those guys are older, but it gets you to the late rounds with the chance to put an exclamation point on your team. And if I hit on the guys that I'm planning my flags on, let's say Yordan gets more than the 474 plate appearances he's projected for, or Michael Busch gets more than 518 plate appearances that he's projected for, and he hits for higher than his 240 average, this team has huge upside that relies on 3 simple factors. Simple in air quotes. The health of Yordan Alvarez, playing time for Michael Busch, which is seemingly already secured, and then less of a regression back to the norm for this highly regarded former top prospect. That sounds like a great outcome for me if I'm drafting right now in a league that matters. On the pitching side of things, if I end up having to wait on Wheeler to come back, it looks like the early roster construction can handle it. And if he ends up giving me 125 innings, that top 4 would be the envy of the league during the heat of the summer months. Now, if I go 4 for 4 here, that's fun, right? And if I go 0 for 4, that's fine too. This team constructed, as we just discussed, can definitely pivot, which is important to remember in snake drafts. You never want to back yourself into a corner. That team wouldn't be relying on Chandler Simpson to get me all of the speed I would need, for instance. But getting these guys I outlined above, or 3 of the important ones anyway, could take this vanilla team to a great team very quickly. That's why this is such a fun time in draft prep season for me, because we aren't quite at the climax of draft season yet, but it's approaching really fastly. I've got a turf draft in about 2 weeks. I just signed up for my first OC last night, even though I'm still in TBD right now. I'm going to assign that team soon. So I might not be writing out that roadmap that I just laid out in pen, but I'm feeling pretty good about my views of the draft room. I think this is fun because it's starting to come into focus. So now it's your turn to plant your own flags and sharpen your rankings and lists and reflect on all of the data and news and insights that you've gathered to this point. Share in the comments any bits of data that you use to inform your decisions that I might have missed, or any bits of news. And especially if you're playing in turf in a few weeks, why don't you go ahead and drop some of those favorite players that you're going to be targeting as well. FBGT. So I just wanted to sneak in somewhere that your flag can be a strategic one and not necessarily just related to individual players. I'm reminded of when Bat Flip Crazy, aka Toby, coined the term pocket aces, which was taking a starting pitcher in round 1 and round 2. This is a strategy that's pretty dated at this point, and but he at the time used it very successfully to his benefit, and he was doing it on a regular basis in really big leagues. And it wasn't necessarily about the players he was drafting. It was about the game theory, the recognition that this was a place to make his team stand out amongst the crowd and be different in a good way. In practice for me, I've been applying this by really prioritizing whip when I've been drafting pitchers early, ignoring the Framber Valdez comment in the previous segment. You've heard me say this a few times now. I guess you could say I'm whip. You aren't here for dad jokes, you're here for tool time. Today's focus is going to be on fantasy.io. I think I'm saying that right. I apologize. And it's spelled fantasy with a PH instead of an F. And then the C is SEA, like the ocean. So it's fantasy.io. This is a side project by Steve-O Swerve. And it's, in my opinion, one of the single most underrated tools available to NFBC players right now. I think it's so fascinating because it's geared towards analyzing the fantasy managers themselves and not the fantasy baseball players on our teams. So I lifted this directly from the homepage of the site to describe this a little bit better. Steve says, using this site, you can analyze your teams in the NFBC and look up what competitors are doing from current 2025 data to historical data, drafts, fab moves, category data, and tools to help you understand the movement of categories and where you are in the standings. 0% player analysis, 100% roto data and roster construction. How are the best winning in the NFBC? This site is a learning tool to understand the game we love. I love that. I thought that was really well done by Steve. Steve has been doing a lot of complimentary posts and writing articles about this data as well. Especially the stuff that he's finding most informative. And most recently, he did a post about how the top finishers and DCs approach their closer situations, down to the specific draft outlines of each player. He has all of this info available on this site for you to play with yourself, and you can build some really cool profiles of some of the best players in the industry to see how they approach their most important drafts. You can also do things like track player drafts after a specific player was taken to see how other managers might build around a player you are targeting early or even potentially late. This is not an endorsement for draft plagiarism, by the way. I just want to be very clear. Even saying that out loud sounds boring, but I saw it pop up a few times recently, so I just figured I'd throw that out there. This is just yet another tool in your tool chest to evaluate your approach against some of the best in the biz and take your game to the next level. With a podcast about game theory, it wasn't a question of if I was going to shout out Steve's work. It was just a matter of when I was going to do it. So I hope you check it out. Give Steve O Swerve a follow on Twitter. It's just Steve O Swerve with 2 E's, if you aren't already, of course. So if you've been sticking around this long, you definitely deserve a sweet treat today. So I want to right a bit of a wrong in this edition of Candy. In the Position Cliffs episode, I believe I drew the line in third base before Matt Chapman. When in practice, I've ended up with a lot of Matt Chapman in my draft and hold teams because of the power upside, the positional scarcity, and just having a comfortable lever to pull in that 165 ADP range. Now, Matt Chapman is projected for a 119 WRC+, and he had a WRC+ of 133 on the road last year, even if it did come with like a rather paltry 105 at home. He's locked into the 4 spot in the batting order. It's been his home in the order. It was his home in the order for 95 games in 2025 as well. He's going to be locked in there again entering the season. In the doldrums of 3B at pick 165, he seems like a fine solution to me. Maybe even perfect for that hypothetical team we just drafted a few minutes ago. Now, on the other hand, and maybe for the first time, I'm going to give you some candy to avoid. Maybe it's too sour or like banana flavored or something like that, which is just artificial banana is disgusting. So that player would be Ceddanne Rafaela, who's now going around pick 130 according to the OC ADP data. Now, I know second base is weak. I know he has multi-position eligibility, but this is a guy who batted higher than 5th in the starting lineup just 3 times total last year. He's projected in 2026 to be below average on offense with a 97 WRC+ in his combined projections. If you believe the Bat X, for instance, that's closer to 88. The Bat X has him down for an 88 WRC+ next season. He has never had a career WRC+ above 100. At any point in his career, he has never gone above 100 for a full season. I know he's only played for like 2.5 years, but he's always been below average. And last year, he finished with a 91 WRC+, which puts him below replacement level. The Red Sox have done nothing to open up playing time for him at the top of the lineup. He is absolutely locked into the 9-hole unless they are just decimated with injuries. This is not a guy that you want to be taking before Matt Chapman, in my opinion. FBGT. That's going to do it for this episode of FBGT. Thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you all enjoyed it. Apologies again for taking so long to get back to the microphone here. We were just really out of it on the home front, and I didn't want to just start coughing on the microphone the whole time. I thought that would be disgusting and not fun for anyone. So I took a little bit of a break there. I am going to try and keep up the weekly cadence going forward like we've talked about. So look for a new episode next week, hopefully early in the week next week. You can find me on Twitter at SMMS79. You can find me on YouTube at FBGT just by searching FBGT. You can also find it anywhere you get podcasts by just searching FBGT. So, we're doing great on the podcast front. I saw a lot of the reviews trickle in while I was out there. I'm really appreciative of all the kind words that everyone has said. We're going to keep this going. So, again, thanks for the patience. We'll have a new episode next week. And until next time, see you in the draft rooms.